Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show, and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by a repeat guest. This is her third time on the podcast. She is Katie Bullard, the President and Chief Growth Officer at DiscoverOrg. Katie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Logan, for having me. Always a pleasure.
It is a pleasure to have you on again. For anybody who hasn't heard your previous episodes on the show, we'll link to those in the show notes because those were definitely packed full of value. So we are more than pleased to have you back on again. Katie, for folks who aren't familiar with you and the team over at DiscoverOrg, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you guys are up to these days. Obviously, some big news, some changes going on over at your org these days.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, DiscoverOrg is really the leading provider of B2B data. It's data that sales teams, marketing teams, recruiting teams use to prospect and hire more effectively. And we've obviously we've been growing very fast. We have a fantastic product. And just in the last 2 weeks, we acquired ZoomInfo. So we've been heads down on that, really bringing these two incredibly complementary data solutions together. And I think, I talk to a lot of customers. I actually manage our marketing and our product teams here at DiscoverOrg, as well as our customer experience teams. And I think what we have always heard from sales and marketing teams in particular is that there's not historically, there hasn't been a single data provider that can give them everything they need to get that kind of 360-degree view of their prospects and their target accounts. They go to one data provider for broad coverage, and they go to another data provider for the deep insights. And I think what's super exciting about this acquisition is that we are bringing together the best in B2B data quantity, the best in B2B data quality, and then the deepest insights and in intel around those target accounts. So I am just overwhelmingly optimistic about what this is going to mean, not only for our company, but more importantly for sales and marketers everywhere.
I love it. You touched on something I think is very applicable right now, that we are looking for that 360-degree view within our prospects' lives and the accounts that we're dealing with as we try to engage more stakeholders in the B2B buying process and all those sorts of things. So I think there are lots of exciting things in the future when it comes to how we leverage data. So I love that, Katie. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how marketers and salespeople can get aligned by getting in each other's heads or in each other's shoes a little bit more today, right? Tell us a little bit about why you feel that's important. And then we have some thoughts I know you want to share on how marketers can think like salespeople and vice versa to come together, bridge that gap a little bit.
Sure. So a little background on me. I didn't start in marketing. The first half of my career was actually in finance and corporate strategy, and I sort of stumbled into the marketing role. So I didn't have any of these preconceived notions about, what it meant to be a marketer or what it meant to be a salesperson. And the first organization that I came into, I very quickly realized how misaligned sales and marketing was. And I would say that for every subsequent group that I've come to work with in a marketing capacity, that has been the pre-existing truth when I come on board, that there's this feeling, marketing doesn't understand what I'm doing and sales doesn't understand everything that goes into marketing. And it's sort of the first code to crack to creating a really efficient, productive go-to-market engine. And so it's something I always think about when I'm working with my teams. And fortunately, I have a sales team here at DiscoverOrg that thinks the exact same way. Mm-hmm. And so Dave Sill and I, who's on the sales side, we'd gotten together and we said, let's outline, what it is that we've been able to do successfully to help marketing understand what sales is trying to do, and to get sales understanding what marketing is trying to do, which, by the way, in our case, they have to, because they sell to marketers and they sell to salespeople, and they have to understand the difference. And so we put that together, we outlined it, and I think it's these universal truths that they exist in every single organization. And when you can crack a couple of these open and really get in each other's brains, it just makes all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's jump into some of the tactical things that people can do that you guys have found to be very effective, Katie. And I know the first is for marketers, understanding the company's sales comp structure and how that affects salespeople. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I was working at a company called Meet Your Tech. It was the company I was at before DiscoverOrg. And we were having this discussion. We were in a marketing all hands, and the marketing team was just complaining because sales was not following up on all of these leads that they were sending them. And somebody said something that made me realize, and I can't remember what exactly they said, but that made me realize this team doesn't know what variable commission means. They don't understand how the sales team is compensated. And so I said, do you guys know how sales guys get paid? And they were just sort of blank stares. And so I actually brought our head of sales operations in to walk through how our sales team got compensated. And in that situation, their compensation was based on a variety of things. A portion of it was activity-based. And then, of course, a portion of it was outcome and quota-based. Sure. And the situation that existed in this scenario was that the sales team was responsible for handling inbound leads, and they were responsible for cold call prospecting, building their own pipeline. Well, they were commissioned very differently depending on where that opportunity originated from. So they got a lot more money if it was self-generated than they got if it came from marketing, which intuitively makes sense, right? Okay, if somebody comes in, they have their hand raised, it should be easier for the salesperson to close the deal than if they are trying to source this and generate it themselves. But it was creating a behavior that marketing didn't understand, which was the sales guys weren't paying as much attention to the inbound leads.
Right. That totally makes sense. You want to incentivize salespeople to build their own pipeline and not just rely on inbound completely, but it can have an unintended consequence or a misunderstood consequence from the marketing side, right?
Well, exactly. And in this situation, it could also have an unintended poor consequence in the overall kind of growth of the business, because when we dug into it, we realized, well, the inbound leads close faster, right? They have a shorter sales cycle, a higher win rate. So yes, we want the sales team prospecting and doing their own outbound pipeline generation, but we also have to follow up on these inbound leads. So it allowed the sales team and the marketing leadership to come together to say, you know what, we need to split these two functions. We need a team that only follows up on inbound leads and they're compensated accordingly. And by the way, we have shared goals across marketing and sales for what happens to those inbound leads, not just the volume of them, but how often do they convert to a demo? How often do they convert to an opportunity? And how often do we win them? And what's the revenue associated with them? And then we need a team that's doing outbound prospecting, that is building their own pipeline and is going, proactively going out after our target accounts. And I kid you not, as soon as we did that, the week we made that change, our conversion rates of inbound leads doubled overnight.
Wow. It's amazing what happens when you align incentives to goals, isn't it?
Right. And I think if it was this aha for both sides of the house that I think was what really brought those teams together.
It's story time, and this growth story is about search engine marketing. Okay, so the story revolves around eSub, a project management SaaS company specifically for subcontractors. Even though eSub had incredible customer retention, they struggled with growth. Being a niche service, they discovered that there was little demand expressed for their solutions within search engines. To take on this challenge, eSub hired Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. After refining targeting, pre-qualifying clicks within ad copy, and developing custom landing pages, Directive was able to increase eSub's marketing qualified leads by 71%, while decreasing their cost per lead by 65%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Not only are you, specializing in roles, so you're getting more focus, more training, but you're also not splitting incentives across, one team or one individual where they have a divided focus and they have a divided pulls, things pulling them in opposite directions. And obviously, if the money is more over here, then that pull is going to be stronger. So I think anytime you can align incentives, whether that's sales, marketing, or any other sort of functional incentive with what you want to see that contributes to the real goals of the business, then when the team and the company goals are aligned, then you see greater success. And I think I pull that from this story as well. So Katie, the next thing I know you wanted to touch on is understanding how sales views accounts differently than marketing. And I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on this, with account-based marketing and account-based everything gaining so much traction in the last few years. I feel like this has been touched on, but there is still a vastly different view of accounts and leads and this different terminology when it comes to the divide between sales and marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I know. You recently talked to Sangram over at Terminus, and I've been on a couple of podcasts with Sangram, and this is sort of our favorite thing to talk about, which is just how different a lead is, right, than an actual sale. And I think a lot of this is driven by the way that MarTech has been created and sales tech has been created, and sort of the misalignment between our technologies. But marketers are so used to measuring everything they do based on the number of leads that they create historically. And of course, sales guys, right, are trying to sell to companies. And those companies, in a lot of sales, that requires 2, 3, 4 people from the same company to get on board and agree to buy this product. Well, what happens oftentimes, especially if you have a relatively finite TAM or target addressable market, is you can generate a lot of leads from the same company. And to a marketer, that might be great, right? I delivered 100 leads this week over to the sales team. Why have they only followed up on 20 of them? Well, when the salesperson looks at it, 50 of those leads came from the same companies. So really, what I actually got and what I can actually work is half of what marketing actually thinks that I'm able to work. And again, so much of that is driven by the fact that MarTech is all based on the lead and the contact and the way that marketing automation systems work. They generally don't do a good job of measuring account engagement. And then CRMs and sales systems typically are focused at the account level and the opportunity level, and they don't do a good job enabling the salesperson to really build out their buying center, to understand what the right contacts at any particular account look like. And so, there's been a lot of advances in that over the last few years, but we haven't gotten over that hurdle. So I think the most successful organizations are those who look at both. I know here at DiscoverOrg, we generate a lot of leads, and I will never say that we're going to go away from generating a lot of leads because we have a great inbound engine, and we have a great SDR team that follows up on those leads. But we also have a clear list of our target accounts that we're going after, and on the outbound side, we have named accounts for each one of our AE and SDR pairings, and marketing supports going after those target accounts by helping identify who all the different buyers are, potential buyers at that account are, and creating programs, ABM, ABE programs to go after all of those buyers, regardless of whether, they're going to turn into an individual inbound lead or not.
Yeah, I think one that points to why we're seeing the rise and the development and the greater sophistication of ABM platforms to bridge that gap between MarTech and sales tech. And it also reminds me of something you mentioned back in one of your previous episodes, Katie, where you were talking about some of the common characteristics of fast growing companies. And you mentioned a mixture of inbound and outbound, and both of those channels being healthy. So what I hear you saying here is that is still very much the case. And to have that marketing and sales working together on accounts is a great way to drive that. So with that being said, we've touched on a couple of ways that marketers can understand and think like salespeople a little bit more. Let's not let our sales counterparts off the hook. Let's talk a little bit about where they can meet in the middle as well. What are some of your thoughts there on how salespeople can think like marketers to bridge that gap and overall be more effective for their organization?
So one of my favorite things about marketing that I was surprised by when I got into this profession was just what a fantastic balance of art and science it is. Mm-hmm, it is one of the most data-driven professions out there, and yet it also, allows you to really tap into your creative, emotional storytelling side. And the best marketers are those that do both very well. And my experience, and this is especially in a high-velocity SaaS environment, is that oftentimes sales teams rely heavily on very scripted responses, very scripted demos when they're working with their prospects. And so, they sort of know, hey, my ideal customer is this title, this kind of company, and I've got 10 demos today, and I've just got to, I have my script and it works well most of the time. So we're going to use the same thing every time. And what the marketer is often thinking is, how do each of these different buyer personas change? I'll give you an example. I mentioned earlier, we sell equally to sales teams and marketing teams here at DiscoverOrg.
Right.
And when I came on board, what I realized was almost all of our messaging, listening to a demo, everything that we pitched was from a sales perspective. So our reps always started with org charts, and they always started with direct dials, even if it was a marketer on the phone. And I said, guys, like when I first saw this product, I realized this would have changed my life as a marketer if I'd been using it before. But the way you're selling it, I would never have gotten that. Right. Because you're not speaking my language. And so we spend a lot of time helping them understand how to get into the brain and emotionally connect with a marketer versus a salesperson. But it has taken a while, and I think we've made huge strides. But sometimes when you're in that environment of, I've just got to close as many deals as I can, and I've got 10 demos today, as a salesperson, you forget to step back and think about that buyer persona.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And the great thing is that when salespeople become great storytellers, they leverage that very, very well. And they're often able to take great messaging from marketing and apply it really well, as opposed to, this is the industry we serve. We see this ROI from this type of company. They're able to weave it in very personally when they talk about this other account I was talking to. This is where we took them. And the more that they become great storytellers and think about it that way, there's nothing but great things that come from that, right?
Absolutely.
I love that. So one other thing I know that you mentioned for salespeople to think like marketers is to embrace the data on that aspect of the data-driven side of marketing. Tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up, Katie.
Sure. So let me give you just one example. One of the things that we've done here at DiscoverOrg to impact our lead flow the most is we do an enormous amount of optimization on our website. So A/B testing, personalization testing, every single day, something new is different on that site that we are baselining and testing. And it has, even in very small increments with very small changes, it's made this huge impact on what we've actually been able to generate for the sales team. And I think sometimes the sales team doesn't take that same level of sort of rigorous data-driven approach. There's a lot of gut and instinct, and oftentimes that gut and instinct is right? But to be able to say, hey, let me step back. Let me look at the accounts I've won. Let me look at the accounts I've lost. Let me look at what I did in this demo, what I did in that demo, which type of buyer I was talking to in this situation versus that situation. And then make tweaks to the way that I am selling the product based on the data that I'm learning, which, by the way, might not only need to be done at like a sales ops level, but as an individual account exec, there's a lot I can learn about that if I took that approach. So I think that's one of the things that I think can be really valuable for sales teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as an individual salesperson, you can A/B test your subject lines, different lines that you use when you're presenting pricing. There are all sorts of things that you can do to be more data-driven. And I think taking that aspect from what great marketers are doing is something else that can help salespeople, align more with marketing and just be better sellers. So I love that addition as well, Katie. So I really appreciate your thoughts here today. If anybody listening to this would like to follow up with you, learn more about what DiscoverOrg is doing, whether they are a salesperson or a marketer, what's the best way for them to find out more or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can find out more about DiscoverOrg on our website, www.discoverorg.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Katie Bullard DiscoverOrg, and I'm on Twitter, Katie Bullard at DiscoverOrg as well. So feel free to connect with me at any of those places. Thank you so much, Logan. It's always just such a pleasure to be on your show.
Awesome. It was great to have you on. Thank you so much for bringing some value to listeners yet again, Katie. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.